Okay. So, our usual start, feet hip width apart. Weight a little bit forwards, hips dropping back. Give yourself time to get a sort of overview of yourself. How are you feeling today? Are you tired, achy, lively? Our practice can and should be in tune with that. There's always a time and a place in arts like Tai Chi for, if you like, progression, if you want to think of it like that. For, you know, pushing a little bit, you think, yeah, I want to learn that, I want to understand that. That's very much a part of the whole journey. But it doesn't have to be done today. Well, the first thing is, particularly for all of you, you've got enough experience of this. I think there's also a time and a place for just settling back and enjoying what you can do in a way that works for you today. And so the warm up, if you want to think of it like that, is an opportunity just to sort of review things. You can use a very simple idea of a body scan. Body scan is a very useful meditative technique for helping to quieten and to settle. And there's people have different views of it. Mostly, it's not about changing anything. It's just using your body as the focus for your attention. Inevitably in Tai Chi, as we notice things, there's an impetus to correct. And if that can happen gently and appropriately, then you can do that. You may even find that simply recognizing your weight isn't in the right place or whatever is enough to bring about a change, because you're familiar enough with the postures and the movements to take that on, for that to happen without conscious effort. And because it's Tai Chi, I always like to start the body scan from the feet upwards. So it's literally a scan. If you imagine, sometimes you get something like a kind of wildlife documentary or something like that, a camera slowly panning across the landscape as an introduction to something. And in the same way, your attention slowly rises up through your body, feet, to your calves, to your knees, from the knees to the thighs and hips and pelvis and that central part of the body. And into your torso, just aware of your back and the front of your body, how they fit together, right up into your shoulders. Your arms feeling quite heavy as they swing around. Your head just resting on top of your shoulders. Feeling the movement, feeling where you feel the movement. Maybe a change in your back or the front of your body, maybe just in your arms, maybe some kind of response in your legs. Be aware of your breathing, going a little bit faster encourages that awareness of our breath sometimes. Where movements within your body, where do you feel, can you feel something in your ribs, in the internal organs, the solar plexus and your belly, the muscles of your back? For me, this is like, if I think of these arts as being an exploration of that inner landscape of our body, and how it relates to an outer landscape. This is the arrival when you get somewhere, especially somewhere you're familiar with, and you just stop at a certain point and look around just to get a sense for the lay of the landscape. It may be that that's sufficient for you. It may be that that's what's working for you today, and that's fine, because quite often that's the sort of approach where there's almost an approach of curiosity rather than this must happen or this must happen. It's like, well, what am I going to see today? We may begin to choose to focus in on things. We want to be a little bit precise about our posture sometimes. But always, whatever changes we make must be, if you like, in tune with, in harmony with that initial view. This is where Tai Chi finds its strength, in working with whatever is happening, blending with the movements, the forces acting on us, whether it be in a sort of solo form, whether it be Tai Chi is its martial aspect. The sort of mentality, if you like to think of it like that, is always the same. Raising your arms a little. The details seem to be endless in Tai Chi. There's always something to correct, always things that we notice. When I raised my arms down a moment ago, my hips came up, which I know they shouldn't do, but it just hips drop down again, the hips drop back. We're not robots, so we're not going to sort of perform equally all the time. And then letting your hands drop down. So one way of looking at what we're doing throughout the whole spectrum of this art is that we're working with these forces that act on the body. And in the solo context, it's really three things that we want to be aware of. One is the ground that we stand on. Another is the effect of this major force of gravity acting on our body. And the third is ourselves, our actual body. In Chinese terms, sometimes we describe it as being a standing between heaven and earth. And how do we find a way of working with that doesn't create a strain, that doesn't create a stiffening? And we can just let our weight roll forwards and backwards a little. From the balls of the feet to the front part of the heel. Feeling that slight change in pressure, and maybe just aware of the feeling in the arch of your foot, the big muscles there at the base of the foot, base of the whole body, almost being very gently massaged. One thing that you may wish to try to build in to this regarding the feet, when we start off, we want to get a feeling of our feet sinking into the ground and the kind of opening up of our feet. That can, interestingly, change the size of our feet. Over the time that I've been doing Tai Chi, I've gone from a shoe size of about 7.5 or 8 to something like 9 as my feet have opened up and I've stopped sort of tightening around them. But that can also lead to a sense of being slightly flat-footed. The arch of the foot should be an arch, and that muscle should be being used. What we want to try and do, one way to deal with this, I'll come a little bit closer so that maybe you can see. My foot is flat on the ground. You imagine somebody's taken hold of the top of your foot, if the hand represents the foot, and it's just gently pulled the top of the foot up. And you see how when I do that with my hand, it draws my fingers in. So if you imagine you're standing on soft sand, you're not gripping the sand with your fingers, which they do in some martial arts, but rather you're just gently drawing your toes back towards the center of your foot a little bit. That's quite difficult. So to maintain that obviously is going to take a time, but it just restores some of the structure of your foot. So try it every now and then. Just remind yourself of that every now and then if that feels appropriate. Hands out to your sides. Arms following the movement. So they're always slightly behind your shoulders until you arrive, and then they swing through. But by that time, you're probably already going in the opposite direction. It's never going to be a big movement with your arms. Again, be aware of the weight of your arms. And the thing that I've noticed about this, or one of the things that I've noticed about this exercise, again, I'll come closer and I'm exaggerating, is if I was doing this in water, as we always imagine, the pressure of the water holds my hands back. This is wildly exaggerated, but I get this kind of puffing out of the chest, not dissimilar to pigeon spread its wings. And then as the arms start to come through, it's like the chest withdraws a little bit, and then the body goes back, and then it's sort of got this. This is wrong because it's exaggerated. This is more trying to describe how I'm feeling the movement rather than how the movement is being done. At least I hope I'm not doing it like this. So, it's always the case in Tai Chi that it's very difficult to describe the movement totally accurately, because to show a movement in its fullness is to effectively do it wrong. So it's very experiential. And just notice the changes that are being made, and perhaps focus on the rib cage, the movement of your spine, how that influences your body. A nice smooth movement, imagining yourself in water up to shoulder height, which encourages your body to move more as one unit, more as a total unit rather than separate parts. And just let your mind follow that process, so that the three elements of mind and body and movement, energy, start to harmonize. We need to bring a certain amount of discipline to our awareness. This is not random movement. So we need the structural aspect of the body, the precision of the movement, to sometimes help us to just focus. But we also need to know that that's not the whole story, that there is this awareness of movement, posture, that carries almost a kind of subliminal message with it. We train our awareness to notice more, to listen more closely to that inner landscape of the body. And this time, You come forwards, stop at that point just behind the ball of each foot, if that's comfortable for you, wherever you find yourself in an appropriate position. Because if you're behind the ball of your foot, you'll be slightly leaning forwards. This time, instead of your whole body going back, as you feel yourself starting to move back, let your hips drop back, just your hips, and feel how that brings you to the upright position. You're sinking down a bit more probably, and your hands coming around, cradling the ball and pushing up, rooting down. Again, sinking down, letting your weight drop. So you're pressing the ball down in water. So if you can maintain comfortably that positioning of your weight just behind the ball of your foot on each side, and that's good. But notice whether your body's just shifted slightly. It's fine if it has. You want to work towards having your weight a little bit forwards, but not to force it. The thing you want to avoid is having your weight right back in your heels. Then when you start to sink down, that's going to happen. So, if at all possible, have your weight in the middle of the foot or forward of that, somewhere between the middle and the ball of each foot, which allows you some leeway for that dropping back of your hips and the realignment of your pelvis as it finds its own level, its own alignment. Slight build up of pressure in the muscles of your legs and the bones of your legs until you just feel that you're pushed back up. Try and avoid tightening in your knees or your ankles or your hips. That may involve a degree of focus on one part of your body. Knees are a very common place to tighten up when we do this. So you might want to just focus on one knee as you sink down and see if you can find a way to just let that soften. Notice the effect that has on the muscles of that leg. And try the other side. And that's another thing you can come back to on a regular basis. But now, change into the wild goose, feeling the movement, pushing up more into your solar plexus. And just, if it's appropriate, allowing the image of the bird in flight to take effect. Another way we can view this movement is that underneath the palm of each hand, there's a ball. We're standing in water at shoulder height, and here the ball pushes up on each side, and here we're trying to just press it down. When it comes up, we don't want it to be a sudden movement. We want it to be at the same speed that the rest of our body is rising. Then change into parting the clouds. You can just imagine somebody here gently taking hold of your fingers, and you push up, feel your body expanding, and the fingers just gently slide out of their grip. and then changing. Dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Simple rotation here, gently, smoothly wrapping your fingers around. I've sometimes described this as plucking an apple from a tree. But if we think of a softer fruit, peaches are very common in Chinese mythology, symbolism for various reasons. And peaches are soft fruit, so if you were plucking a peach off a tree, you wouldn't want to squeeze hard because you'd squash it. So you're wrapping it around. There's a space within the palm of your hand there. If you grip too tightly, you'll realize after a while that you're tightening your shoulder as well. Stiffening up really anywhere in your body can create a similar stiffening elsewhere. So although we don't always put a great emphasis on our arms and our hands, especially not at first, it's in no way to suggest that they're not significant. They're very much a part of that whole landscape that we work with. And changing to pushing in four directions, expanding out from the center of your body, pushing your arms up, but also maybe aware of a certain amount of pressure downwards. If there were a ball in the center of your body and it inflated, it would push in all directions, forwards, sideways, up and down. Expansion outwards and drawing back. Soften your shoulders, not straining to move your arms. So, excuse me, as your arms extend and contract, can you feel the same sense of rotation that you just felt in Dragon Plucks the Stars from the Sky? That little bit of movement within your shoulder joint. Fingers don't wrap around here. In fact, the opposite, they spread out a little bit. You can use the image of moving through water, but notice the effect that that has on your body. And see if you can actually use that as an image, as a guide to how you want to move in this and in all movements. This is probably quite a good movement to try that with. Some of them, it's difficult. Some of them are more complex, of course. And then changing. And then adding the turn, it's comfortable. This is one of those exercises that is a little bit stronger in my experience. And if it's appropriate, you might want to just push at that a little bit. Get that little bit of extra movement. If that suits you. And then switching sides. Notice any difference between one side and another. And don't assume that what you could do on one side is going to be the same on the other side. Recognize those differences. Look to try and get some kind of balance there, of course, but let the movement help you do that rather than forcing the movement to work in a way that isn't appropriate. Again, add in the turn. One more time. And then sinking down and pushing up, rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. Hips going back. Very gently in your legs and your back. Again, this is a strong exercise, one that we might want to use to condition our legs more, to strengthen our back in the way that we want it to be strengthened. But choose when to do that. Maybe you want to do the movement smaller. If you do it smaller, you will still get an understanding of the movement. It'll be a softer movement. Maybe rather than pushing at things, maybe just enjoy that sense of the fluidity of the movement in your back and your spine. One more time. And then polishing the table. One more time. Hands drop. Take a slightly wider stance, moving your weight from side to side to about 60% in each leg. And as you begin to arrive on one leg or another, let me sort my feet out, get them at the right angle, then you're turning and you're really turning towards toes that you're moving towards. Going to about 60% in each leg, as I say. Try and avoid your knee collapsing inwards. So a bit of a, what we might call a stretch here in the inside of the leg. Your hands following. So as you turn your body, turn your hands. You move across. I'm exaggerating there. So my hands are facing that way to your left. I turn and they rotate, the arms rotate. And again, it's a rotation that is very similar to the rotation that we felt earlier in the earlier exercises. At the moment, they're swinging through just a gentle arc, part of a circle. And now they can swing up. And again, you'll feel the point at which the hands rotate. Turn here, there. Here my hands are palm up, but they rotate again, going down. So as much as possible, maintaining the movement with the palms of your hands facing the direction of the movement. So if you were moving in water, mostly you would be feeling the pressure of the water against the palms of your hands. But it's also quite a natural place for the hands to turn. So don't, it might be in a slightly different position to where my hands are turning. As a general principle with this one, your hands really stopping at about shoulder height, give or take a centimetre or two. And it's a figure of 8 movement, or sideways figure of 8 movement, or an infinity movement. Your hip drops down as your hands come up, and you can raise the opposite heel, bring the foot in. Now you step out as you rotate your hands and you move across, turning, bringing the foot in, and back across. So as you get used to this movement, here my hands are palm up and they rotate palm down as I step out. So it's, again, if that isn't working for you right now, just have it in the back of your mind. And gradually what we do is we make these connections in movements in Tai Chi at different times and in different ways. You don't have to bring your foot up, but if you can drop your hip back and bring the foot in and just rotate in your hip, that may mean that you're able to do that. We don't want to tilt the pelvis. I don't want to get to here and do this, because now I'm going to wobble around all over the place. And as we're doing all of this, don't lose that sense of awareness of contact between your foot and the floor. In fact, if anything, once you've got the shape of the movement through your upper body, that should be a primary focus. The contact with the foot is the whole foundation for the movement. That and that feeling that as your arms rise, and maybe if your leg comes up, you're sitting down in your hips more. So again, be careful of your knees. Do this one more time. And that's a nice simple movement for investigating what we need to do in order to sort of like get into this position reasonably comfortably. And I mentioned the things there. You want your hips to drop back. You want to keep a focus of attention on that contact with the ground, as well as what's happening in the upper part of your body. It's quite difficult. This is an expansion of awareness as much as anything else. It's very easy to find ourselves sort of get into here and kind of go, oh, like this. You see how I've come up? Everything's started. Everything's suddenly come in to the arms. As you get more familiar with the movement, what you're looking for is this, not this. And so we gradually build in. That is a very difficult process, and it's an ongoing process. Sometimes I can do it, sometimes I can't, and there's various reasons for that. So it's something that we can practice that exercise with, and sometimes we do it with the forward and backward movement and stepping and so on and so forth. So just to kind of investigate this thing about standing on one leg. If you've ever done a Tai Chi form, for instance, there are points where we're doing a kick and so on and so forth. It's very easy to get taken up in the kick and that kind of thing, and find yourself wobbling around. So we develop this background awareness. Again, thinking of it, putting that in the context of that, an awareness of that in a landscape of your body. If you know the landscape, you're in a piece of woodland or something like that, you kind of know the background, you know where the pathways are, you know where you came in and out and so on and so forth. And that comes with familiarity. Now, have one foot forwards, transferring your weight. You can practice that awareness of your feet, your hips, with this exercise as well. It's one of the key things I think that we get from this exercise. Once we've got the idea of the weight transfer, we can begin to move more freely. Just those moments when the hips sink, those moments when they come up. What is going on there? So I think one of the useful sort of mental attributes, I suppose you could call them, in these arts is one of curiosity, investigation. Trying to do that without too much of a judgment. If you having your hips coming up can be very annoying. But trying to say, oh, the hips come up there, I wonder why, rather than the hips have come up again, sort of thing. And then raising your toes and your heels. not until we recognize what we might regard as a problem that we can actually begin to do something about it, of course. And then stepping in. So it might be your hips coming up, you might have a long-term problem there. If you've got a bit of arthritis in your hip or your knee or something like that, then that's going to put a limitation on how far you can reasonably expect that physical sinking down to progress. So, you don't want to bend your knees too much. You don't want to risk putting the pressure on your knees. And again, these are things that we try and account for in our movement. It doesn't mean, incidentally, that we can't find a way of progressing. You're walking through that familiar landscape and you come to a bit of the path that has been turned into a lake by the rain. It's all muddy and you can't get across it. There are other ways, there are other areas to explore. There are other ways of getting on to further down the path. And then on the other side, %70 of your weight going into the back leg, 60% into the front leg. Try and make that a precise awareness. And then raising your toes and your heel. Remember, as you do this, think back to that hopefully familiar feeling of your hips dropping down, your pelvis dropping down. And step in. See if you can just feel the full weight of your leg hanging from your hip as you take the step. Don't strain in your hip to move. Just let the foot swing in and out. What I find helpful for that is to just think in terms that what I'm trying to do here is I'm going to rotate my hip to bring my knee up, rather than to sort of like stiffening my hip or in the muscles around my lower back and buttocks. Just a simple rotation. It's quite strong in the thigh muscles when you do that. But we're used to that in Tai Chi. And then stepping through. And if we can think of the raising of our foot in that way, then I find it helpful to avoid throwing myself offline. Change direction. And shake out. Have your right foot forwards. Fisherman cast the net. Try and focus, if you're familiar with this exercise and it works for you, try and focus on, as you get to here, my knees above the ball of my foot, and that, not necessarily a physical dropping down, but that feeling of dropping, of overhanging through hips, pelvis, lower back and buttocks. almost like if you were sitting on a large ball, like one of these big blue balls you get in gyms, you would compress the ball and it would push the sides of the ball out. So it would get squatter, but bigger. It was horizontally bigger. And that horizontal movement, pushing your hands out. That might be a slightly complicated image, difficult to describe. It's dropping down, pushes the hands out. It does that on the backward foot as well, but it's a bit more difficult to feel on the back foot. It isn't such a big movement for one thing, and there's other things going on there as well. So maybe just focus that idea on your front leg for the moment. And then pushing away, same thing. It's the sinking down that's going to push your hands forward. I'm really exaggerating this. And again, it may be a physical sinking down, more there, although that's going to overextend my knee fairly quickly. Or it may just be the feeling of the sinking down that we've become familiar with. Or it may just be that sometimes the intent is to push harder. Just watch out if you do that, but your body doesn't get too enthusiastic. Go, oh, they want to push harder, I'll do that. because that can happen as well. And then this time, sinking back, and as you sink, turn. Still that feeling of settling, of sinking in your hips. It's just that now, because you're turning, your hands appear to be being pushed forwards and backwards. Wind blows the willows. Good. And shake out. Have your left foot forwards and same things again. So once again, we're using a very simple movement, fisherman castanet, to help us to get a sense for a way of moving. And I'm thinking now about that idea of the hips dropping down, pushing the sides of the ball out. And that movement, that energy, moving the arms for you. Good, and then pushing away, or if you prefer the image, pushing a boat. Pushing away is worth reflecting on as a name, though, because it could mean something different. Rather than pushing against the wave, it could mean the wave doing the pushing. And that fits in with that idea of sinking down, of course. Good. And then wind blows the willows. Again, just remember, you're not trying to lift your arms. The very fact that they're being pushed away from your body will mean that they swing up a little bit. Soften your shoulders and your elbows. And then this time you go forwards and turn, raising your back heel, bring your foot in, and you can just step forwards, or you can raise the foot a little bit if that suits you. Put the foot down and through. Dragonfly skims the water. Turn in, swing, so the arms swing out, dropping your hip, stepping through. Dragonfly skims the water. When you run out of room going forward, step back. You're always turning towards your front foot. Well, that's more a better way of thinking about it. You're always going to turn towards the foot that's doing the stepping. And this time, try going forwards again. You've got room. So your weight's on the front foot. It's the back foot is the empty foot that is going to do the stepping, and that's the side that you're turning towards. Hip dropping back. That overhanging feeling through pelvis, buttocks, lower back. And then again, changing direction. One more time. And shake out. Rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Under one shoulder. And your arm. Other side. Into your back. Around your hips. On your belly. And finish it on the upper. And shake out. So there's a certain sort of progression going through the different movements where we take simple exercises and what we learn from those exercises about, say, what it means to have our hips sinking down, or whatever it is we're focusing on, is then taken into the future exercises. This is very much part of the course in these arts. Again, if you ever try to learn a Tai Chi form, you'll know that all the forms are quite complex, even the shorter, supposedly simplified ones. And it's very difficult, even in a 5-minute form, to maintain a focus of attention, thinking about, oh, I've got to drop my hips or something like that. If you start thinking about that, you're going to lose where you are in the form almost inevitably. So it's always the case, in my experience, every school of Tai Chi that I know that teaches the forms and so on and so forth will have its set of exercises, 8 of these or 5 of these or whatever, that encapsulate the basic ideas that we want to try and bring into the movement in a very simple form. I suppose it's like learning a language. You learn with very simple sentences and basic phrases, and then gradually you're able to put a conversation together. So if there's an exercise, if something like, say, dragonfly skims the water, if you're somehow not getting it, think about what it is that you're not getting, and feel free to ask questions. Feel free to contact me and sort of like say, could you go over this, or could you suggest an exercise that will help with this, or whatever. Very happy for that to happen. But now, embrace tiger, return to mountain. Once again, just coming back to that settled awareness, feeling the drawing in and downwards, and those few moments of just quietness and stillness before we move off again. Not in a hurry. One more time. And stand. Check out. Thank you very much, all of you. So.